Hello, I'm Charlotte Connolly. I'm the museum curator at the Polar Museum, and welcome to this interview, which is part of the Big Freeze Art Festival. I'm joined today by Claudia Myatt. Now, had things gone to plan, Claudia would have been in Antarctica around now as this year's artist in residence, but as with many things, COVID has put a stop to that plan. So all things being well, she'll be heading off either later this year or early next year. Claudia, perhaps you can tell us a bit about yourself and why you applied to be the artist in residence.
Well, hello, Charlotte. It's really nice to see you, even in a little box on a screen. And I'm quite glad to be going to Antarctica later in the year rather than now, I think. And it's given me time to really kind of find out more about it and research it, because I've never been there. And I got very inspired by the wild places. I spent 2 months last year on a sailing ship, sailing from Galapagos to Easter Island to Falklands via Cape Horn. And there's something about that Southern Ocean. There's something about being in it, miles from, thousands of miles from other people, that just became addictive. So when I saw the opportunity for the residency, I thought, I've got to get back down there, whatever it takes. I've got to get back down there, because what I love is the history of exploration, the history of seafaring, and I love sketchbooking. I'm a kind of compulsive sketcher. I'm a marine artist by profession. That's what I do to pay the bills. But my first love is going somewhere and recording it in a journal, and with mixing up words and pictures and seeing everything afresh and encouraging other people, because I teach sketching and drawing as well. But I love the idea that it makes you look at everything afresh. And when there's places that you really haven't seen before, then it's all the more striking. So what I wanted to do was just take you through a few of my sketchbooks that I did of the voyage, what I've done since during lockdown to keep the practice of cold hand sketching, and just a few of the materials that I use. If that's all right, Charlotte?
Yeah, go for it.
Right, I'm going to switch cameras. Yeah. What I did on my sailing voyage was keep an illustrated logbook every day of the trip. I'm not going to show you all the pages, don't worry, but it was a mix, as you can see, of words and narrative. And every day I just drew something. And of course, you're seeing virtually the same scene every day. You're seeing the sea, you're seeing the same people, you're on the same ship, but there's always something fresh to see. That was our landfall on Easter Island. I'm actually going to go back to the chilly end of it, drawing figures in motion. I'm flicking these pages at random. Drawing figures doing things on deck meant I didn't have to, but actually it was very cold as we went further south. The sky was different every time, the sea was different every time. If it got really cold, I would go below decks and draw something in the cabin. And our meals became more important. I draw our dinner. Of course, the wildlife was the thing. How the further south you get, the more there is. Mm-hmm. And my challenge was to draw these birds on the wing. What I didn't mention earlier is that I didn't take a camera on this trip. I like to travel camera free, because it's too easy to let the camera do the job of your mind and your eyes, and it becomes a kind of reflex and impulse. And you then find there's a little part of your brain that says, oh, don't worry, you don't have to look at this now, you can look at it properly later. And you don't. There's got to be something about the intensity of being there in the moment and knowing that when that moment's gone, that's it. And I found my memory of the trip was far better for not having taken photographs. What I do love is maps. So I love this. I love the names. Don't you love the names of these places that these explorers went to? I've been looking at some of the names, the place names on the Antarctic Peninsula, and they just reflect the whole danger and thrill that those early explorers must have felt. I'm peering in at the chart. We've got electronic charts on the boat, and I was zooming in. Desolation Island. Can you imagine what they felt like when they were naming that? And that's a very, very simplified map, but I just love I love maps and that kind of bird's eye view you get. That was Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day was spent very wild and lumpy sea with waves flying over the deck as I had my morning tea. So what I was hoping is that the sketchbook reflects the feelings as well as the visual things, because really we all see the world differently, and everybody's photographs tend to look the same, but everybody's sketchbook would be different, completely different importances every day, different ideas. You're making ideas visible, and that's the sea-based book. And like I say, that was Cape Horn itself on the island group, and of course more and more wildlife coming in, and little bits of history. So I'm going to flick through that. I'll arrive at the Falklands, and of course penguins. We all love a penguin. So I had the best time in the Falklands. Clear enough?
Yeah, that's
the best time. I've never ever seen a penguin before I went there, and I spent 2 weeks. And the museum, of course, in Port Stanley. I love museum sketching because you can get the story as well as the image, and also the wildlife will stay still. So I started off practicing. It's nice to practice in a museum where you can study the structure and the postures of the animals, and before you get to them in the real. So this is my Falklands sketchbook, which I absolutely loved, and it just made me want to go further. That page is particularly significant because that shows the boat I was on sailing out of Port Stanley, and she was off to Antarctica and South Georgia, and I just wept because I wanted to be there going with her. I think that's what made me really want to make a resolve that one way or another I wanted to get back down there. It was just such a pull. I could have booked to stay on longer, but I'd used up all my savings on the trip I did do, so it wasn't an option. And it was just heartbreaking watching her go. But the Falklands was a fantastic place. I was lucky enough to be taken around it by one man who worked for the Conservation Office, who I'd been given a contact for. So he took me to the wild places, where I was able to just look at the difference between the different types of penguins and the way they behaved, all those squabbling rock hoppers, and then off to. Have you been to Falklands, Charlotte? No.
I have not, no.
It's extraordinary. It's a ridiculous place. There's no roads. You can drive for sort of 2 hours in a beaten up old Land Rover to get to a picnic spot, but nobody else has been there except the shipwrecks and the whale bones on the beach. Sorry, I get carried away when I go through here because I just loved it so much. It was a beach littered with huge big whale bones. And how are we doing for time? I've not been paying any attention.
We're fine for time, yeah. No,
yeah, good. And so again, it's just sometimes I'll fill the page and sometimes I just grab snapshots. Sometimes I was really fed up that day because I couldn't get anywhere, and that shows because I couldn't be bothered to finish it. I couldn't get anywhere. I'd hung around the visitor centre, but nobody was able to take me anywhere, and it was raining, and the cafes get full with people off the cruise ships, and I was fed up. But then the next day it changes again, so it's all about mood. And what I want to do is a couple more sketchbooks and then a brief look at the working methods and the tools I take and the challenges of drawing on the spot. Since I've been back home, of course, I was very lucky in my timing because I got back in January 2019, and by March none of us were going anywhere, and we still aren't. But I'm very fortunate in that I live on a boat on a tidal river in Suffolk, and the river is my garden. And even during lockdown and then all through the summer, I was able to get out on the river and do my exercise there, away from all the crowds on the footpath. And I have a kayak, which of course I can now use all winter. And I'm particularly going out in all weathers this winter because I want to get over any obstacles there are to drawing in extremely cold conditions, so that I'm prepared for Antarctica, and I know, whether to wear fingerless gloves or no gloves, what materials to use. There are challenges that the watercolors don't dry quickly enough in very, very cold weather, like they do in hot weather. So I'm trying already. It's brilliant to have this chance to try different materials. Now I'm going to show you some things without wandering too far from the microphone. Where's my bag of goodies? Now, actually, I think what I'll do, I'll come and show you the materials when I'm at the other camera.
Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, this is a tiny sketchbook that I take on my kayak or just have in the wheelhouse of my boat. And that was the view. We've had so much snow down here. all good practice. And that's the view out of my window. And it's usually, if I'm kayaking, I take this little book, which I can fit just sort of between my knees on a little plastic box in the kayak. Again, I'll show you my paint box in a minute. All my sketching materials are very small scale, because the less you carry, the better, the more likely you are to use it, and the easier it is, and the less kerfuffle if you're trying to capture birds in flight. So we've had some really frosty mornings. This was January on the River Deben, where we're actually crunching through the ice. And so, of course, when it's cold, you have to work really, really fast. So all I tend to do when I'm out on the river is just quickly get my gloves off, grab a few colours. And of course, in the kayak, you don't have to carry a water container. You just dip your brush in the river. The fact that the river is salty doesn't actually matter. But you get some fantastic skies. That was 12th of January and a really frosty morning in the dawn. And there isn't time to get more than one layer of paint on when you're out there, because it just sits there being soggy. So I immediately come back, put it on the radiator to dry the whole book, which is usually a bit damp, then get my paints out, fresh from memory, and just add, on this one, I just added more clouds, added the birds, which I couldn't put on. The river is full of lapwings at the moment, and they just take off in a cloud of black, dark wings when you get near them. So all these lovely kind of patches of grey and the flecks of water and the trees were added after. But I find the more I sketch without a camera, the better my visual memory is getting. And sometimes I'll take a photograph as well, but the photograph usually comes out, if I'd taken the photograph home to draw, I'd have thought, nah. It's just something about the excitement and the light and the glow that you have to catch. And it's not even accurate. It is what it is. We've had avocets as well, beautiful birds. And that was, I had time, slightly milder day. I had time to do a bit more to that one. But usually I'm just grabbing moments in the ice or the cold. But the lights, you know, I'm in the same place every day, but you're not in the same place. You're in a different atmosphere. There's a cormorant on a post by my boat. Just fabulous shapes. So this is my little, this was recently, so it's up to last week before. I try and do something every time I'm out there. And I think that's enough on sketchbooks. I think, Charlotte, unless there's anything I forgot to say.
So it's great seeing all of your sketchbooks, because one of the things that we were really excited about when we met you, when we were doing the interviews for the artist residency, was the idea of keeping a diary and getting a real sense of what it's like. And also, you've already mentioned 2 different boats or ships that you spent time on. So that kind of comfort with being at sea. And our artist residencies are in collaboration with the Royal Navy. So you'll be on board HMS Protector while it patrols the Southern Ocean. How do you think that will be as an experience compared with all your other sort of seafaring and boat living?
I like the feel of big ships. I like the way they move through the water. I think an icebreaker might be quite interesting, as presume she's a different underwater hull shape. And I know quite a few people have been in the Royal Navy, and they say, oh, you'd have a fantastic time. And I'm also going to talk to Andrew and Shelley and a few of the other people who've been on board. But I've been looking at her. I see she's out of dry dock now and back afloat. So I've been following her on marine traffic. But I'm looking forward. It was a very different motion on a big ship, and I get seasick, but you get over it. They say the best cure for seasickness to go to sea and stay there. Usually it's only a few days. So that's all right. But it'll be a lot warmer, I think, than a small sailing ship.
Probably, yeah.
Although I was very lucky, the sailing ship I was on did have a kind of, basic heating. So there was a little radiator in your cabin that you could dry your gloves on every day. You come off deck in the middle of the night.
So the temperature's then a challenge as well for producing your artwork. And I think you were going to share with us a few of your...
Yeah. I mean, the main thing, as I've explained in the sketchbooks, is you can't do it all in one hit because you've got to work. At some point, you can't work wet. Although I am experimenting with different media to try and get around that. I'm experimenting with coloured pencils, drawing pencils. I might try some more dry media. And ordinary coloured pencils, because sometimes you want to do more on the spot. You know, by the time you've stood there waiting for things to dry, the things you're drawing wandered off. So for wildlife sketching, I tend to use other things. I've got this lovely thing called a magic pencil. Put it in front of me. everything reverses on the screen, doesn't it? It does weird
Yeah.
things. So that's a kind of multicolored tip.
Uh-huh.
And so what it does is you don't quite know what color it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So that's quite nice for quick, spontaneous drawing. My entire kit fits in that bag, so that that's been around Cape Horn. That's very battered. Been on a lot of voyages, and everything goes in there. So you've got to be able to move quickly, get things out of the way in a hurry, and not have bits sort of sprawled everywhere. The things that are in them, obviously pencils, drawing pens. I use a lot of drawing pens because they're you know, quick to use and they're waterproof. Whoops, get near the camera, girl. I've changed my camera recently, so I'm out of sync with it. Okay, so that's kind of quick, spontaneous stuff. You'll have seen from the sketchbooks I use that a lot. And I just carry 2 paintbrushes and a very small paint box, which looks like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, again, that's been everywhere, and that's all that's got in it is primary colours. And I have just added an opaque white. I'm not sure how useful that will be. I didn't take that one with me before. What I've got in there is mainly blues, because I mainly paint the sea.
Mm-hmm.
I get tired of painting the sea. Oh, I'm going to put, I know I've got a virtual background. Let me put that on. You can see what I mean. See if it works.
Uh-huh.
There you go. That's one of my, that's the kind of thing I do. And I'm actually at sea. We were in a rough sea there. And all I'm really doing is hurling different blues at the page, trying to leave the white of the paper for those crests, and drawing on top. Some of those marks are drawn on top with coloured pencil, just to get the kind of, trying to catch movement really. So in my paint box, now I'm going to switch that off again, or else my paint box will do silly things. Here we go. There. In my paint box, back to reality, I've got 5 different blues.
Yeah.
And I can never found I can't do without any of those.
Mm-hmm.
I got 5 blues, 4 yellows, 3 reds. I want to put purple in that one. Again, I've changed it since I got back from my trip for more local conditions. But that is everything. I don't carry any greens, or I've got one kind of browny red in there, but I don't have too many colours, because when you're working fast, you need to know what your mixes are and just grab them.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too many colours, you can end up with a whole pile of sludge.
Yeah.
So, I kind of keep them fresh, but my blues are my thing, obviously.
Well, I think when you get to Antarctica, eventually there'll be plenty of blues there for you.
Oh yes.
Putting down on the page, and of course red is a big colour because HMS Protector itself.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, we're back. Yeah, no danger of having to use any greens.
Right. I wouldn't have thought.
Can't be doing with them. Can't be doing with foliage. I have to sometimes, but yeah, I think that's all I take. I'm trying to think of anything else useful. Oh, I do take a Pritt stick.
Okay.
And scissors, because I stick things in my book. I think one page I didn't show you, which I quickly can, is, as well as drawing maps in my books, I stick things in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a good way of covering up a page that's gone a bit wrong. I can't put sort of flight tickets and, you know, leaflets and things in there. But what I quite often do, let's find the right page, is, again, I do a title page, which is kind of sets the scene. And quite often, I mean, on that page, all I've done is cut out a chart of our route. And on the first section, I did the first, I drew the little boat with the boat and our route and the mileage. But that's just, it's preparation. I ordered some old out-of-date nautical charts before I went, and sometimes I cut them up, tear them up, stick them in, draw on them and write on them, and that adds to the kind of texture and the storyline, and it kind of, and also I love finding historical detail as well. It was a good ship's library on our ship, and at the same time we were becalmed off Cape Horn. You see that little picture there? I was reading a book about the sailing ship days, of which has always interested me, and that's the track of one vessel in 1914, which isn't that long ago, trying to get round against the wind and at the wrong time of year. It was in May. And, you know, can you imagine what degree of tenacity and endurance that must have taken? And we were moaning about having been becalmed for 5 hours because we weren't using the engine. To be a Cape Horner, you don't use the engine. So it gives you a kind of, being there gives you a sense of perspective, and you start looking down the years and appreciating what it must have been like for people with fewer gadgets than we've got, because at least we had weather forecasting. And yeah, so that's why I used glue. That's why I needed the glue. That's where that was going.
So looking ahead, then you've been to Antarctica, you've made your amazing sketchbooks. Then what would you like to see happen with the work you've produced?
I'd very much like to. I like producing books. I'm quite interested in a children's book, perhaps a storyline, and perhaps I'm looking into getting kind of perhaps a local school engaged before I go, because I think that's, you know, it's, people love stories and they always have, and if we can create either fictional or narrative in some way, but there will definitely, I love an excuse to produce books. I produced a book of my last voyage. I thought I had one to hand, but I haven't. It's out there. It's called Sketchbook Sailor if you look at my website, and it's narrative plus pictures. I always love words and pictures together and think they should never have been. At some stage they decide you're a grown-up and you don't need the pictures anymore, but you sort of do.
Yeah.
It's kind of, every picture tells a story, and words create a picture, so I like the marriage of the two. So I think definitely a book, possibly children's book as well. There's a few other ideas bubbling.
Yeah.
What I don't tend to do is big frame pictures in galleries, because that's just not what I do. I think other people do that far better than I would.
I can say from the museum, we're really excited to see what you come up with and think about how we can share it and then share that experience that you've had of traveling to the Antarctic.
I can't wait to come to it's so frustrating. I really want to come to the museum now, and I want to look at the way the early naturalists drew and how they had to be so meticulous. We're free to do what we like because we don't have to be the camera. In Wilson's day and all the other early explorers, people back home were depending on them to be accurate, to show them things they'd never seen before. But now if somebody wants to know what an albatross looks like, they'll just Google it. We now have to do something beyond that. People are blasé about perfection now. You know, photography is so good that we're saturated with perfection. And I think now it's time to perhaps dig a bit deeper. I'd love to bring more historical context to it, kind of get, you know, I've just been reading Kathleen Scott's biography, and kind of the more of the human story behind our desire to understand the world we're in. So, I don't know, kind of, lots of threads at the moment. Something will happen. It usually does.
Fantastic. Well, we will look forward to seeing what you come up with, and I really hope we can welcome you to the museum and our collections.
Yeah, soon.
Not just you, everyone. We're really missing our visitors. It'll be fantastic to have more people.
It looks amazing. You look online and it's kind of like people waving showing you a really nice buffet and saying, you can't taste it.
Well, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, we'll be there soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.